So this is another tutorial video for using Onshape, and this is going to be to create your protractor. It's a slightly simpler version than ones that we've done previously, and should end up with looking something like this. So we're hoping to try and get through the whole process in one relatively short video, so hopefully you can keep up. So create yourself a new document, call it Protractor. I've already got one set up here. But I'm going to make myself a new part studio down here and start the whole process all over again. Now, the first thing that you're going to do is to click on the top work plane, very common, and sketch on it. And then when you're in sketch mode, you want to right click and view normal to sketch plane. All right, first thing is to get a circle, a center point circle. Start from the origin in the middle and click and drag, and then click to finish. And then as you've got the number with the rectangle around it, it means you can input the size, and that is going to be 150 millimeters, 150, and press enter, and that is done. The next thing is the line tool, and we're going to draw a line that cuts through the circle just beneath this origin point, so just beneath the halfway line. All right, so click and drag and pull it across and keep it straight. I've made my line a little bit longer than it needs to be, but you could do it so it's touching the edge. I tend to make mine overlap and then I trim them off after. So after drawing your line that cuts through, you are then going to use this trim button, trim tool, and snip off the bottom part of the circle so that we're left with the semicircle plus a little bit extra there. These bits, if like me, you've drawn them a little bit oversized, need trimming. And then the other thing that we're going to do to finish that is going to be to use the dimension tool and set the distance from that line that you've just drawn, click, to the axis origin point, click, and we want that distance to be 5 millimeters. Okay, so we've got a total diameter of 150. I'm just moving those so that they're in a slightly more convenient place. And then we've got a distance from the halfway point down, a little bit extra, of 5 millimeters. So that sketch is done. We can now go to extrude and tell it that it's going to be a new solid, that we're going to use sketch 1 as the profile, and it's going to be a depth of 2 millimeters thick. And if we put that into isometric, you should be able to see that we've turned that into 3D. All right, so that's the thickness of our protractor. Done. Right, next stage. We need a hole cut out of this because the protractor that we're using in particular is designed that way. Now, instead of drawing that separately, what we're going to do is go back into sketch 1 and edit it. Again, right click, view normal to sketch plane so we can see what we're doing nice and flat. And then we're going to use a new tool, which is the offset tool. Now, if you click on offset and then click that top edge there and the bottom edge there, it will create an extra offset line. Now, I don't want it to go on that outside. I want it to go on the inside. So I need to hit this arrow to change its direction. Now, the distance in between them by default is set to 5. I want mine to be 20. So I'm going to need to use the dimension tool, and then it will ask how much distance do you want it to be. Not 5, we want 20. So 20 and enter. And you can see there it's created 2 offsets that are already trimmed, and that is the perfect size for our protractor. So we're done there. That sketch can now be okayed, and you'll see that without having to do anything, it's updated and has taken that cutout from the protractor. So that is pretty much done. What we would like to do to make this a little bit nicer to handle is to put some filleted edges on it, but we're going to do that afterwards. The other thing that we do is we're going to need to tell which is the top side, and the top side of the protractor has got a beveled edge, a slightly chamfered beveled edge where it slopes down and gets closer to the paper. So before we put any rounded fillets on any of the edges there, we're going to put our beveled edge across the top. So for this, what we're going to have to do is to manipulate the view so that we can look at the bottom flat edge, not the curved edges, so the bottom flat edge here. When you've got it selected, you can hit sketch and right click view normal to sketch plane so that we're looking directly down on that flat surface. Now we're going to scroll and zoom right in on the left hand side here, and then use the line tool to draw a triangle, and it wants to start from the top. We could lock it onto the top, constrain it to the top, and then draw it a little bit longer than it needs to be. Click, click, and then connect it all up and go click. So that's my triangle. Ideally, the length of it should be about 3 millimeters long and about 1 millimeter high. It's not positioned where we want it to be. So if I deselect the dimensions and then click that little circle and drag, because I've dimensioned it, it shouldn't get distorted. I want to keep it. I don't want to lock it on there because it won't quite cut off all of the shapes that I want. So I want it to overhang ever so slightly. Just zoom in a bit. So yeah, overhang ever so slightly. So that it's going past the outside. So there we go. There's my 1 millimeter high, 3 millimeter long triangle, which I've just drawn, and on Sketch 2. And if I OK that, we're going to use that now as a profile to revolve and to cut it off. So we go to the revolve tool. We need it to be a solid. We're going to remove instead of add. The faces that we're going to use as a profile is what we've just created there. That was Sketch 2, that triangle. So we click Sketch 2, and then where it says Revolve Axis, click on that. And then in there, you're going to select this outside round edge of the protractor there. And you can see as soon as I select that, it is taken that as the path that it's going to follow all the way around to cut off that beveled edge there of the protractor. So that's done. We can OK that. And let's have a little look. And there we go. So that's looking pretty neat. Finishing touches to the overall shape are going to be to add some fillets. So we're going to go to fillet. And we're going to make, instead of 5 millimeters, we'll change that to 2 millimeters. So not too big. And then we're going to select the 2 inside sharp edges. So this one here, just the little one, to round that off. Move it around. Select the other one on the inside there to round that off, and then we'll do the same thing again on these 2 outside edges just to soften them a bit so they're not sharp when you come to handle it. We could potentially 3D print these and they would work. They would be dimensionally accurate. If we get time, any of you guys want to come in at lunchtime or break time, then that is an option for you. It's probably not the best sort of thing to 3D print, but there you go. Just because it's flat, and when it's big and flat, they tend to warp a little bit. But there we go. Those are the fillets. We can OK those. Now then, that was the fairly easy bit. The most tricky bit now is adding the little notches for the degrees and the numbers. So a little bit tricky. We're going to use some patterning tools for that. But we don't want to put the numbers and the notches on the front. They're going to go onto the back. All right. If this was a real object, and I've modeled it on a real object, the plastic is printed on the reverse side, in backwards. So that's what we're going to do for this one. So we know which is the front. It's the side with the beveled edge on it that we've just created. So we need to flip it around so that we're looking at the back. All right. So the flat side without the bevel on it. So with that flipped around, we can select the back surface and sketch on it. As usual, it's a good idea to right click, view normal to sketch plane, and that gives us a nice flat view of the back. Right. The first thing we're going to do is draw a corner rectangle. Okay, so we need a corner rectangle selected, and we're going to draw our corner rectangle from the left-hand side, starting from this edge here. And it also, as well as starting from this orange edge, it also wants to be in line with the origin. So as much as possible, try and make sure that you've got that little dashed line selected and locked on, constrained to there. It doesn't actually matter if you drag your rectangle up or down. To be honest, yeah, it's only going to be like 0.2 of a millimeter wide, so it doesn't matter as long as it works. So I'm going to go for up. So click and drag to make your rectangle. As soon as you let go, the length we want to set as 3 millimeters long. So we go 3, okay. And then the width is going to be 0.2, I think. Okay. Am I doing it 0.2? We've got this slides document to help us out here. 0.2 it is, 3 millimeters long, that's it. So that is our rectangle. Now, while we're still in edit sketch mode, we need to use this circular pattern tool. This is where it does start to get a bit tricky. So we need to deselect our corner rectangle, drag a little box around to select our rectangle that we've just drawn, and then we're going to use this circular pattern. If you can't see it, it might be hidden underneath the linear pattern, but it's there. Okay, so we need to use this arrow. Sometimes you might find it's pointing in the wrong direction. If it is, you can just click on it and change it. And you also need to click and drag it to make sure that it's just revolving around the full half of the protractor there. All right, it doesn't need to go any further than that. So we drag that handle so it's 180 degrees. All right. And there's another really important thing that we need to change here is where it says 3 times, that means there's 3 instances. So it's only going to create 3 copies of our degree line. That needs to be a lot more. We need to change that. So double click it, and that's going to be 181. So that's 0, 1 to 180 degrees. So 181 in total. Enter. And you can see a little preview down there of what that's going to look like. When we're happy, you can see the green tick is the left mouse click. So left mouse click to say that we're happy with that. It's doing a bit of calculation. So yeah, you can see there it's created our circular pattern. With that, we can OK it. So OK sketch 3, and then we're going to extrude that. Use the extrude tool and then tell it that we want to add material by 0.1 millimeters, but the faces and regions to extrude, we need to go in and click on sketch 3, the last thing that we created, that circular pattern with all of our patterned little rectangles on there. All right, it might take the computer a little while to make all of its calculations, but when it does, then it should work okay. We need to just check sometimes, if you've done it according to the video so far, you should be okay. But if you're finding that you can't see it, when you zoom in, it's not actually adding anything. It might be because the arrow is pointing the wrong way, in which case you might find that it fails and goes red. Okay. So make sure that the arrow is poking out, and that means that we're adding material just like we would be if we were adding ink and layering it on top of the plastic for the protractor. So that's it. Okay, that. So those are all of our little degree lines. We're now going to put in the tens, and we're going to basically do that exact same process, but just slightly different in certain cases. We select the back surface again. We sketch on it again. We right click, view normal to sketch plane again, and use your corner rectangle again. Zoom in onto the left, and we're actually going to use the exact same starting point as the previous one. So it locks on, click and drag, and we actually want to get it to lock on to the same width. It's just going to be a bit longer, this one. So when it's locked onto the width of 0.2, the length, we can set that to be 9. And enter. All right, and again, before we come out of this, we need to deselect our rectangle, drag a box around it so that we're ready to pattern that rectangle. Use the circular pattern tool. So the only variable that's different from the last time of doing it is that we've changed the length to 9 instead of 3. We're going to do the same on the pattern. We're going to change it to 180 degrees. The instances this time, instead of 3 changing it to 181, we're going to change that to 19. Okay, so that's 1 for the 0, and then 10, 20, 30, all the way up to 180. So it's 19 instances. All right, and that creates our pattern for the 10s, and then we can left click to OK that. OK the sketch, which if we've done it properly should be sketch 4. And then we need to just extrude that, just like we did before. We're going to add it as 0.1 millimeters. It's going to reference sketch 4 as our profile to extrude, and then when it thinks about it for a little bit, we can click OK and should see all of our markers on the front, on the back. The only thing that we need to do to finish this off, and you could do some extension work by adding your logos, which we've done in previous lessons, Helix, Staedtler, or Staples, or whatever you can add on there. You can add them on the front or on the back. In order to see them from the front, we're going to need to make this transparent. So we need to right click and go edit appearance for part 1. And you can drag this handle to just make it transparent. And you can see as soon as you make that plastic see-through, you can see the ink that's on the back. It's a bit of a faff, but if you wanted to, you could zoom in and go and change these from being blue to being a black color. So right click, edit appearance for, actually, could we do it like that? Might be able to change the color of it, but to be honest, I think as it is, it looks fine without needing to change the color. Actually, if you were going to change the color of the parts, we would need to make those instead of instead of adds, they would need to be new parts. So they'd be separate parts, and we'd have to change the color of them each individually. Not really worth it, to be honest. It's a bit of a hassle. So yeah, that's there or thereabouts finished. We could add a logo onto it. The only other thing that we probably want to do is to add some numbers. So very quickly then, select the back, sketch on it, right click, view normal to sketch plane, sort of coming in at a bit of a weird angle, so I'm just going to use the arrows there to flip it around. For this, we're going to use the text tool. So text goes in here. I'm actually going to start backwards. We're treating it like we're printing in reverse. So we would normally have 0, 90, and 180, but I'm going to do this in mirror image. So I'm going to go for this one as being my 180 and go backwards. Now be careful when you draw your text box. You don't want it to lock onto anything. So if you make it quite low down and then click and drag and type in 180, I like to make it bold because it tends to extrude a bit better. And we'll have a look at that. Now it's upside down and back to front. So back to front is good, but upside down is less good. So if we right click on text, right click on the text and edit text. If I flip it vertically, say OK. Now we've got it in reverse, which is what we want, and the right way around. So I'm going to put a measurement on that because it's quite tall at the moment. I think something like 4 is perfectly big enough. 12 is quite big. And then I'm going to use the bottom handle to drag that one into position. Now before I OK that, I'm going to try and repeat that another 2 more times, one for the 90 and one for the 0. So we'll get our text, Now, if I start in the bottom right and then move it to the left this time, I might not even need to reverse it. So this is going to be 90, bold, and OK. Now you can see there, it has come out upside down. So I do need to flip it. So we'll need to go to our text, just like we did before. Right click, edit text. I think we're going to need to flip that horizontally and vertically. So do that again. Edit text and just flip it horizontally so it's just backwards like that. Fine. Use the bottom handle to move it into position. It looks like it's come out exactly the right size, but I'll just double check that the height of that is at 4. It's not quite. So 4 for that, and then we'll do another one for the 0. Okay, so it's 0. It's in bold. It's got a height of 4 millimeters. And then if I want to move it into position a little bit just to make it a bit neater, that is pretty much ready to extrude. Okay, and then you can OK the sketch, and then we'll do the same extrusion that we did to our points on there. It's going to be 0.1. It's going to be added, and the sketch is going to be the last thing that we drew, which was sketch 5. Just make sure that it's coming out away from the surface, so that's good. And there we go. If we flip it the right way around, we've got our 0 degrees, 90 degrees, and 180 degrees. And if you could really be bothered, you could go in and do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. But I'm lazy, so I'm not going to bother. So there you go. Completed Protractor. That has taken 20 minutes. A little bit better than 3 separate videos that I had before. So hopefully that's a bit simpler. No more surfacing and thickening, because I know there was a few problems with some boys following those operations. So see how you get on with that. And also don't forget, like with everything, to do a drawing.